Well, what a gorgeous day. The blossoms are out. Not quite as warm as last week. I was away last week. We were away in Vancouver and then Vancouver Island. So it's great to be back. But I did listen to the sermon. I got on the podcast app and I listened to it. So it was very good. So today we are talking about silence and solitude. And this whole series has kind of been revolving around the idea that we are trying to learn to follow Jesus. I say learn because we're beginners or apprentices. We're trying to figure out how we do this. And we're not very good at it. And I think that's probably accurate for most of us. It's certainly accurate for me. And let me just say, in starting this idea, spiritual formation. You know, one of the biggest, for the 30 plus years of me being a pastor, I have struggled with the lie, the enemy that he's told me over and over and over and over and over and over. You get the idea? This is the lie. I am not spiritual enough. I'm not a good enough Christian. I certainly am not a good enough Christian to be a pastor. I don't pray enough. I don't get up early enough. I don't listen to enough worship music. I don't read enough my Bible. I'm not holy enough. I'm not enough. I'm not spiritual enough. Anybody ever had that thought just once? Or twice? Just once, yes, exactly. I had it once. And then you come into a series on spiritual formation and you're just going, oh my goodness. So I think all of us together, we need to pray. I so love the worship this morning and some of the songs I want to make reference to. You got them on your I'll make reference to them as we go through them. But I think we need God to just come and dial us back to a place of where peace and grace collide. Lord, would your peace and your grace collide? Being settled in you, and then the grace of your empowering presence to rush in to our frailties and our not enoughs. Would you meet us here as we've been singing and asking for this morning? In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we have been introducing, and really it's just been an introduction into a whole bunch of different spiritual practices or driving skills in one sense that are a part of a spiritual journey. And some of the topics, Megan spoke on gratefulness and worship. Victoria spoke about meditation. George spoke about Sabbath. And then last week, Megan came back to this topic and spoke about a secret place where we can connect with God from a place of authenticity. One of the quotes from message last week, her message, I love this quote. It's all about finding a quiet, secluded place where you won't be tempted to role play before God. Isn't that great quote? Finding a quiet, secluded place where you won't be tempted to role play before God. And that is just such a great on-ramp for today's topic because we are going to introduce the spiritual practice of silence and solitude. Before we do that, let me ask you a question. Everyone just think about, we've been through a few, there's a whole bunch of other practices, but let's put the question up. Here it is. What is your favorite spiritual practice? Just want you to think about that. What is your favorite practice? We've only covered some of them. Think about that. Just throw out a few simple ones. Favorite spiritual practice? Talking to God. Sabbath. Tithing. Worship. Music. Worship music. Yeah. Meditation. What's that? Praying in tongues. Praying. Bible reading. Okay. Now, silence is, that's her favorite. And you're here. No one, well, that's because we haven't introduced it yet, but we're tracking. You and me are going to have a great conversation today. That's right. So here's a thought, a thesis I want you to think about. I would go as far as to say this. Our favorite spiritual practice is the one that comes most naturally to us. Just want you to think about that. It's not rocket science. And the reason it's our favorite one is because it's one that comes so naturally and we're drawn to it. It's the one we think everybody should practice more. You just need to more. What comes naturally to me, you need to do more of that. But, if anyone's had more than one kid, they know that every one of their kids is different. If any one of you is in a relationship, you know that, oh my goodness, my partner is completely different than me. And what I find comes naturally spiritually as a practice does not come easily to my kids or they have all different personalities and gifts. So, let me give you a couple simple examples. When it comes to connecting with God, you could do a whole bunch of different opposites, but here's one. Some people, most easiest, it's not a word, you know what I'm saying, connect with God easier when they are with other people. Like in a Sunday morning setting like this, or in a corporate worship setting. Last Thursday night, myself and my wife, and apparently Renato as well, we went to the Brandon Lake concert in Pacific Coliseum where the Canucks play. And it was like a piece of heaven. It was like half of the, that song, Pray, half of the arena was singing one part, and then he had the other half singing the round, and then it was like this smoke show, and it was like these lights, and it was crazy, but it was wild and it was intimate, and we were talking about all the teenagers with their hands up worshiping God. It was like a little piece of heaven. Corporate setting. Some people find it easiest to connect with God with others. Other people find it easier to connect with God when they are alone. Okay? There are two types of people. Obviously, some of you are thinking, this sounds a little bit like introverts, extroverts. And you wouldn't be too far off in that. There are some people who love to connect with community. And there are others who more easily love to connect with silence and solitude. They could be more introvert wired. Now, this is what I want to say. Our spiritual growth and real growth happens when we actually learn to grow beyond what comes most naturally to us. Sure, we love to try, to spend time with what comes naturally, but growth is learning to connect and grow in something that does not connect with us naturally. So, for example, those who love times alone, like silence and solitude, they need to learn to grow into some of the community spiritual practices. Why is that? Lest their love of solitude drifts into isolation. Okay? But those who love community and time with community, they need to learn to lean into things like silence and solitude, lest their constant feeding off people leads them to a shallow and unexamined life. They also need to learn to lead. And they never take the journey inward because they're just feeding off people in an outward sense. And if you remember the topic I did on the critical journey, that journey inward is a crucial part of a spiritual journey. So, it's kind of brilliant, Megan, for you to ask me to speak about silence and solitude. Because most of you who know me for any period of time, when there's a word that you think about Vern, a word is not silence. Vern is rarely associated with silence or solitude. So the fact that you asked me to speak about this, something that does not come naturally to me, I think is kind of brilliant, because you go, well, we're going to see if Vern can learn this. Maybe if he can learn it. It's like Mikey, the old advertisement. If Mikey likes it, any one of you could learn a little bit of silence and solitude. So let's grow together. And I'm telling you, this is not my bent. Practice what you preach. And we're going to get to baby steps. That will be baby steps for me. So here we go. Why do we need silence and solitude? Well, we could just start by saying if we're going to be followers or apprentices of Jesus, then it would make sense that Jesus should be our example. So you'll see this over and again. Jesus constantly modeled his practice of silence and solitude. Let's read from Mark chapter 1. The evening after sunset, many sick and demon-possessed people were brought to Jesus. The whole town gathered at the door to watch. So Jesus healed many people who were sick with various diseases, and he cast out many demons. But because the demons knew who he was, he did not allow them to speak. Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Later, Simon and the others went out to find him. When they found him, they said, "Everybody is looking for you." You get this? Everybody's looking for you. Where were you? Where are you? Ever had somebody say that to you? Where were you? I texted you. I called you over and over again. I say to my wife, why do we have a cell phone if it's never turned on? Where were you? Right? But Jesus replied, "We must go on to other towns as well, and I will preach to them too. That is why I came." So listen to this. Jesus had an amazing service, amazing ministry night. It went great. And now the disciples were going, we are on to something big. Let's rent out a bigger arena. This is crazy. We had a third of the town here. We're going to get the whole town. This was nuts. And the people were going, okay, we're going to build this thing up. And Jesus, they finally find Jesus. They're frustrated because they're trying to figure out the final plans for, how they're going to make this work. And Jesus says, you know what? We're off somewhere else. And they're going, no. We're not off somewhere else. You don't get it. You don't understand promotion. You don't understand how this works. And Jesus says this, that is why I came. I came to move around and spread this message of the kingdom everywhere. I'm not interested in the fact that everybody is wanting me to stay. So here's the question. In the light of such intense social pressure and expectation, and the keen disappointment of Jesus' followers, why is it that you think Jesus could say, we're on to another location? The reason is because he had spent time alone with his Father, who had reminded him why he came. Ever felt the expectations of other people, implied or explicit? Any of you? Ever felt other people's keen disappointment with you for what they expected or wanted? Ever felt pulled or torn by people? None of you can identify with any of that, right? Right? And here we have Jesus spending time alone and learning to actually be grounded and centered, so that didn't cause him to change why he was there. So, as we walk through it, we now see that Jesus did this over and over and over again. This pattern of getting off by himself alone was central to the life rhythm of his life. Let's listen to what it says in Luke 5. Yet the news about him spread all the more. Again, big buzz, big crowds, so that crowds of people came to heal him and to be healed of their diseases. Okay, so we're talking, again, big buzz, big momentum. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. In fact, in the book of Luke, you will read at 9 different, that's what we're just told of. There's 9 different times in Luke when it's actually recorded Jesus getting away by himself alone. So here is an obvious question. Let's go ahead and put it up here. If the Son of God needed silence and solitude to live his daily life, do you think that we need it as part of the rhythm of our life? Now, in grammatical and English sort of things, this is what we call a rhetorical question. What is a rhetorical question? The answer is obvious, but you ask it anyways. Let's ask the question again. If the Son of God needed silence and solitude to live his daily life, do you think we need it as part of the rhythm of our life? And the obvious answer is yes, absolutely. Because we're probably not as connected as Jesus was to the Father. So that would be the starting place, and maybe that's all we would need. We're Jesus' followers, we're Jesus' apprentices, then we do what he did. End of story. But because we need a little bit more time, let's give you a few other examples as well. Here's the next one. Silence and solitude let God in. Scriptures are very clear, and we sang about it this morning. We talked about silence. What was the start of that song about be still? Be still and know that the Lord is in control. Psalm 46:10, real simple. Be still and know that I am God. In order to know that he is God, we need to do what? Be still. There's a great example in Elijah's life where he has this encounter with God, but God is not found in the big wind and the big thunder and the big rainstorm. It's at the very end where God whispers to him. If you are going to hear the whisper of God, you have to be still. The only time and place, the only way that you will hear the leading and whisper of God is if you're quieter than the whisper. See, I have these 2 in-ear monitors that I use. That's a fancy word for hearing aids. But musicians, I call them my in-ear monitors now. Because I've learned I have to hear, I miss higher frequencies. Now, because of my years, I don't know, in a rock band or something, I don't know. But because I would miss certain frequencies. The bottom line is this: we all need spiritual hearing aids, and it starts by us learning to be quiet and still in our lives. C.S. Lewis wrote this fascinating book called Screwtape Letters. And in his book, it's a conversation between 2 demons, a chief demon and a junior demon. senior and junior demon. And they're tasked, screw tape letters, they're tasked with messing up, opposing, getting in the way of a Christian's growth. And in their book, the chief demon warns his junior demon that one of the most dangerous things to their cause is silence. In fact, the senior demon describes the devil's realm as a kingdom of noise. Isn't that interesting? That is Satan's, the kingdom of noise. And he says, in the end, at the end of the universe, we're going to make the entire universe a kingdom of noise. Noise, noise, noise. That's our goal. That's our plan. Let me read you an amazing, powerful, convicting quote. This one. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And that all of man's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. When did that come from? Is that like about, most recently? This came out of the 1600s, when the internet was really slow in the 1600s. And here's a guy in the 1600s. Talk about a prophetic statement. Isn't that wild? Okay. I know most of us are going, oh my goodness, what are we facing? So, here's the next reason for silence and solitude. Silence and solitude is about being present. Learning to be present. What do we mean? Well, first of all, we already talked about being present to God. Silence and solitude is about learning to be present to God. Henry Nouwen says this: without solitude, time alone with God, it is virtually impossible to live a spiritual life. So silence is about being present to God. It's also about being present to ourselves and our bodies. One of the most common phrases in modern psychological, spiritual talk is this word mindfulness. Anyone ever heard the term mindfulness? If you've been on it's all over. Mindfulness, practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is just the spiritual practice of silence and solitude without Jesus, right? That's often just what mindfulness means. And silence and solitude allows us, this is going to sound like a funny thing, it allows us to catch up to ourselves. Catch up to yourselves? What are you talking about? There's this great story in the book, Ruthlessly Practice the Elimination of Hurry, which we've often been quoting, John Mark Comer. And it's a story of, it's the height of British colonialism, and a British explorer shows up in West Africa determined to explore the inner parts of Africa. So he gets a whole bunch of porters and gets all sorts of supplies, and he sets out to explore inner Africa. And they start, and it says, after an exhausting day of travel, all on foot, and a fitful night's sleep, he gets up ready to continue the journey. Okay, we're pressing inward. The only problem is the porters, those carrying all of the supplies, they refuse. He exasperated. He says, come on, this is what we're doing. He cajoles, he bribes, he pleads, but nothing works. Finally, he says, what is the problem? To which the African porters go this: we are waiting for our souls to catch up to our bodies. We are waiting for our souls that are still back there to catch up to our bodies. We're not all together yet. They knew what they needed to restore life's balance, where the British explorer did not. For those of you who have ever had a lagging computer, you know a lagging computer, when it doesn't do what you immediately tell it to do, what do? You give it a whole bunch more commands, right? Quickly. And that causes that computer just to speed right up, doesn't it? And finally, you have to take your hand off the keyboard and go, I need a faster computer, babe. I need a faster computer. And what happens is eventually those commands in the processor catch up to it. We live our lives like a lagging computer where our spirits and souls haven't caught up to our bodies. And silence and solitude allow that to happen. We then can live from the core of our lives and not the surface. Instead, what we do, instead of truly engaging and being present, we look for escape. That's another sign that our souls and spirits haven't caught up to our body. One of the interesting things it says is it's no surprise that we are living in a culture of emotional unhealth and an epidemic of anxiety. Interesting. Be present to God, be present to ourselves. Silence and solitude help us be present to other people. When we take time alone, we are better to actually be present with other people. It also means about being present to the world around us when we take time alone. It's interesting, when I go out for my walk, I was just noticing the world around me. You know, when I walk, I see all of these ducks that are swimming around, and now I've been noticing blackbirds, red-winged blackbirds, and listening to red-winged blackbirds. It's amazing, the world around us. And sometimes it just means slowing down and being in a place of silence and solitude means being present to the day and present to the moment, where I don't miss all of those little gracelets that God has for me in the present moment. Silence and solitude helps us re-engage with all of that. The next one, we've already partly introduced silence and solitude, push back against the distractions that crowd into our lives. Do you remember this might sound like I'm an old fart. Do you remember when it was normal just to sit or stand and do nothing? It was normal. You know, my wife says I got to pick something up at the grocery store. I don't like going into the grocery store, but she has the list. I will serve her by waiting in the car and let her go in and get the stuff. And I would just sit there alone. Are you kidding me? It's like, doggone it. Open up my news app. What's going on? Okay, let's get my news app out. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, catch up on my news until, for Russia, thousands of tanks accepted the cost of, and I won't sit alone. I won't sit in quiet. I want to check out what's going on in the news or others, people at social media, whatever. Remember the time we just sat alone? Or waiting in Starbucks. Why do the lines take forever at Starbucks? But, waiting for coffee. Just waiting. Maybe even talk, somebody engaging in conversation. Not that I enjoyed that, but you know what I'm saying? Just waiting for the line to go through. At the border. Do we wait and just sit quietly? No. Immediately grab our phone. But the bottom line is we've been trained to do that. You want to see what the next generation's like? I teach high school 2 days a week. Chilliwack Senior, Sardis Cedar, GW Graham, Imagine High School. I'm in there, trust me. This is on all day. Students the whole class are on it. Cannot handle any quiet alone time. Again, that sounds like an older, but it's true, but I'm just as bad. Distractions push into every area of my life. Now, I'm going to give us baby steps out of some of this, so don't get too worried. But Andrew Sullivan, who talks a lot about digital minimalism, calls it our distraction sickness. And not that this makes me, maybe this makes me holier than everybody in this room. I don't even use social media anymore. So I'm obviously got a halo that's over my head that's quite shiny to every one of you, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm not distracted all the time, even without social media. Okay, this is what Ronald Rollhauser says, talking about distraction. We are distracting ourselves into spiritual oblivion. Wow. Okay, are we all feeling a little small right now? You all feeling just a tiny bit convicted, or a tiny bit feeling shame, or that you don't measure up, or there's something wrong with you? Anybody feel a little bit of that? A few of you? Okay. Let's give you some baby steps towards silence and solitude. Okay? This line that makes a lot of noise learns to wear headphones in terms of silence and solitude. Okay. Now, any steps have to pass 2 tests. So, sorry, Lorraine, you don't count this one because silence and solitude come normal to you, so you don't need these baby steps. But it has to pass the Vern test or the personality test, where this doesn't come normally and naturally to you. So it has to pass that test. Okay? I would say the second test that has to pass, I know the kids are out here, it has to pass what I call the Josh and Molly test, or, now your guys' test as well with the new baby. It has to pass the life stage test. It's one thing for me and Susan, who are empty nesters, to say, well, yeah, I practice silence and solitude all the time. Wow, aren't we, But what if you have a young child? Or 2? Or 3? What is the test that works? So it has to pass those kind of scenarios. What if you work 2 jobs? What if, all those things, right? You hear what I'm saying? Don't be trying to put on other people's armor here, or other people's templates toward this. I'm really trying to get you to go, what is going to work for me? So here are some baby steps that I think you might try. Number 1, introduce silence and solitude into what you already do. So take some time driving somewhere and you immediately put the radio on. Then learn to drive without the radio on or something playing in the car. Do you go for a walk? I try to walk when I'm not teaching 60 minutes a day. 6 blocks, 10 minutes around each of the park. 6 times 10, I used to teach math, that would be 6. 6 laps around the park. I start the first, before I put my podcasts on or my music on, I do at least 2 laps in just silence. Thinking, asking God, talking to God, just 2, 20 minutes. I'm already walking. I just do it in silence and learning to be present with it. So have I changed a lot? No, I've just switched a few things. So that's the first one. And for maybe it just means start with 10 minutes. Put a 10-minute timer on your phone. So, okay, number 1, introduce something to already do. Number 2, have a distraction pad to write down any distracting things or to-dos. It's always good to have something, and as soon as you have an idea, oh man, I got to add that to the grocery list, I got to do that. You just jot it down or put it on a notepad or something where, okay, it's in my parking lot. I don't have to worry about it. Especially when you're trying to have time with God. I have all these random thoughts. Well, that would be a great idea for a podcast. That would be, oh no, write it down and it's done. Number 3, create your own quiet place. Now here's an interesting one. Some people love to sit alone inside in a big comfy chair. I have to see outside or be outside. If I'm not next to a window, I feel like I'm in solitary confinement. That's just the way I'm wired. But some people are different in terms of that. I talked to George. George is in Edmonton this weekend. He always goes out for a walk in community forest between Sunday morning before church. And I go, George, it was pouring rain this morning. He goes, I know. He says, what are you, someone dropped you on your head when you were a kid? Like, it's pouring rain. He says, it's great. He gets out there, doesn't he? In the pouring rain, walking in the community forest, listening to the rain. That's his quiet place. What is your quiet place, free from distractions? Again, don't forget the Josh and Molly test. Whatever that works for you. It might be just 5 minutes. Maybe running to the bathroom and sitting in there for 5 minutes. Mom, right? Whatever that is. Okay, your own quiet place. Okay? Number 3. Okay, this is a little bit of a bigger step. Practice an Amish hour. Yeah, and an Amish hour, what are the Amish known for? Any guesses? No electricity, essentially. Yeah, I know. So what you do is you say, for a certain period of time, no screen time. We're going to be an hour before bed or half an hour before bed. We're going to turn off all screen time and just have not, and it would probably do amazing things for our sleep. Now, some of you kids or other people are going, I hate that guy. Why did you ever let him speak Sunday morning? But it's the Amish hour. Maybe it's half an hour. A lot of people that I work with use something called the Freedom app. And in the Freedom app, what they learn to do is they learn to set boundaries. So for me, I don't need the Freedom app for this. I don't go on any news sites. Again, you don't have to do what I'm doing before noon. Aren't you spiritual, Vern? Yeah, I don't check out the news before noon. I got other things that I want to concentrate on before noon. Other people say, I'm going to use the Freedom app, or you can just do it on your iPhone, and I'm going to put a 20-minute limit on Facebook today. Or 20-hour limit. No, whatever it is. I can put a time limit on how much time I'm on a social media app, Instagram or whatever. Just because, you know what? I don't need to spend, but just get some distraction-free time. So, and the last thing is learn to invite God into each new activity of your day, especially the time you choose to be alone. Now, I just want to be clear. This whole idea, and going back to last week as well, we are talking about being alone and inviting God into that moment. Now, it could be something as formal as what we've often called your devotional or your quiet time, where you're reading scripture and praying. But sometimes it's a lot more subtle than that. It's just, and I have tried to learn, and we did the song at the end there, Sam. It was about basically learning to, I forget the words, but it's almost like inviting God's presence into each new activity. And I've tried to learn, it's this whole idea of practicing the presence of God. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read a book, even a fiction book, a shoot me up book. God, I'm just inviting your presence right now into this next activity I do. I do that try to do that between each class when I'm teaching. God, I just want to invite your presence. I want you right here beside me as I'm teaching this class. Inviting God's presence. I'm going out for a walk right now. God, would you walk right along with me? Just every time I do a new activity, just instinctively inviting God's presence into that activity. In one sense, I'm learning to practice his presence. That's it. Baby steps. I'm not trying to turn you into a monk or a nun, cloister you away like the desert fathers, right? I'm just trying to say, where are your baby steps? For you to take spiritual steps. Again, some of you, this comes really naturally to. Others of you, you got to start really slowly. 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. So, this I think we'll do. I think we're just going to take a couple minutes. Let's going to pray and ask God to speak to you. You know your life. You know your story. You know your struggles. You know your compulsions. And show you something with his grace. He wants to take you by the hand and lead you on a bit of a journey with. Can we do that together? Let's do that. We're going to take just a couple minutes of silence and ask God to speak. Lord, right now, we're asking you to show us what this looks like. the baby steps you have for us that you want to meet us in and empower us in. So speak to us now, Lord.